Yeah, well, why don't you give us a view? Why do we iterate? What's that all about?
Well, because what we do is ultimately very much unlike, for example, software development, where you kind of have something to do and you've got to get that thing done. What we do is very exploratory. So in some ways, you can think of it like the agile process, like Scrum,
Yeah.
which is a bit like this, where you have to check in with the customer or the client regularly to see where things are, to get their approval, to discuss changes, anything like that, and that you don't end up going off on tangents, because often the things you see on the screen, weren't what you really wanted, what you thought you wanted until you see it in place. And it's very much the same with us. In that respect, it's even more important that we check in, because we will follow lines of investigation that we think are pertinent and interesting and valuable. And if we have to stop and ask permission to do that, then the process slows right down. So we tend to work in loose sprints where we can follow our noses and check in regularly with the client to find out whether or not this stuff is valuable, to discuss it. This is very much what we talk about with the dolphin moments
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
we've discussed, Pete.
Well, I mean, basically, it's design thinking. We've both got a long background in IT, and me on the project management and agile side. And so for us, we don't even think about this stuff because if you work in IT, you run projects, and the history of IT is running them like engineering projects where you line everything up front, do all your design, do all your build, and then you test it and it all fails. And people know those as government projects generally, IT projects, and that's how they run, that's how they fail. We've now got tools where I can do design and I can write the code and I can test it all within half an hour. So then you get this idea where you're going through the whole process in much smaller chunks. And I used to love it because it was a real reflection. Suddenly the process reflected what everyone was doing. And I'm like, this is great. And I remember looking into it and coming across design thinking, and it was just the same thing and it was iterating. But the big difference was we're not defined here. And software development is, that's generally already defined, even down to user story. We are way before that. That's like, we've now arrived at the Americas. Oh yeah, let's go and check out, see what these plants are, see if we can take some back with us. No, we're in the sort of stage of, oh, we're about to set sail. We're going over here. We expect to find this. Right, let's go. And so you've got to come up in these dolphin moments. And rather than saying, we were looking for this and we found it great, we're saying, well, we went over here and we found this. What do you think of that? Should we continue going in that direction? Should we change direction? Is this useful? And that's iterations.
Yeah,
Learn.
I mean, if you look at it from the customer's perspective, if they'd sent you off to develop whatever, an application or something quite big, they would have assigned a business owner,
Yeah.
and that business owner would have been part of that agile iterative process and have seen it build up. And the sort of more senior business unit user was probably checking in much less frequently, right?
Yeah.
And to them it looked a lot more waterfally, and to them it was just an update, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking about it as an integral part of the process and thinking about it as something they could be more involved in a more granular fashion.
Yeah.
And when we start a conversation like this and saying we need more of your time, we need it more frequently, we're going to iterate very, very quickly.
Mm.
People are like, well, we just don't work like that. And the response is,
Yeah.
well, I hate to tell you this, right? But you do. Across the board, I think this is starting to change. People are expecting to be more a part of the process in every part of their lives. And I think that the IT world and the IT project world has been way ahead of that.
Yeah.
And it continues to be way ahead of that in this DevOps style thinking of just do it, right? Which is antithetical to the way things have been for decades from a business user's perspective, who expect things to be slow and measured and safe.
Yeah.
And so I think it's quite an interesting and difficult conversation to have. But as opposed to the example being using you're delivering a mobile phone app or something,
Yeah.
the intermediary stages are probably a little bit more noise than most business users want. What we find is that when we check in regularly, it becomes an extremely stimulating conversation that leads to findings and insight and collective understanding that simply wouldn't have happened otherwise.